Hello everyone, welcome to the presentation of Risk Management Plan by Coderunners Group. Myself is Brian Anthony and I'm presenting on behalf of my team members Alex, Sanjay, Anub and Jonathan. Let's look at the risk management plan that Coderunners Group have. The glossary for today's presentation is an introduction to risk management first, which will explain to you what the risk management is all about. Second will be a risk analysis, how to analyze risk by a 3x3 table method we use in this project. Then followed by the categorization of risk as it is done in our project. Then identification of risk and action plans, details on each risk, how it's identified and how it's handled in our project, or how we look forward to handle in our project. Then areas to improve on our risk management plan, that as a self-reflection, followed by the conclusion of the presentation. Introduction to risk management. What is risk management? Actually, risk management is a plan of identification, classification, analysis, and initiating strategies to avoid or minimize any kind of risk that you face. Risk management can be done in all aspects of life. For example, when you cross the road and you see a vehicle turning to your side and you see the turn lights on, you are actually doing a risk management in your brain without you even knowing it. You are calculating the car's turn radius, how fast you should move to avoid collision with the car. All this is your brain doing a risk management without you even realizing it. So the slogan "safety first," we hear it everywhere. It's just not applied to human hazards like accidents. It also applies to software like data loss in a bank can leave you bankrupt. So this risk management is very important in software as well as any other project you might stumble upon in your life. Risk analysis, how to analyze a risk. There are a few steps of analyzing a risk. First is identify the risk. You can use team discussions, development teams and requirements teams. You can meet up and discuss with them what kind of risk that they think that will arise during project development. And once the risk is identified, you can further go into identifying a severity of the risk, that whether the risk is a major risk causing or can cause a big, huge delay in our project, or is it a minor risk that we may totally disregard or we don't need to take any action to avoid it. The next step in risk analysis is identification of likelihood of a risk, how frequent it can happen. Did it never happen at all, or is it known to happen once or twice, or is it a frequent thing that will keep on happening during the project development? Once you have clearly identified the risk and its likelihood and severity, you can use the risk analysis table that we have shown in the presentation to analyze the risk. So we will put the likelihood on one side and on the columns, and the severity on the rows, and you can see that based on the likelihood and the severity, we can judge what is a level of risk that we are possessing. So likelihood is divided into three: unlikely, occasional, and frequent. Unlikely is 25% of occurrence. Occasional is 26 to 75% of occurrence, and the frequent is more than 25% of occurrence of risk. Severity, on the other case, is a minor risk, might be one that has a little to no effect on the project. Moderate risk might have an adverse effect on the project. and might require some resources to take countermeasures. But the most important one is a major risk that will definitely have an adverse effect on the project or may cause delays or may cause project shutdown and need to be handled with efficient use of resources or need to allocate a certain amount of resources to handle the risk. What the risk level is also about is about the priority it gives to each risk. So low risk level means a low priority risk. The project team may or may not decide to have a contingency plan. They can go without a contingency plan and the risk might not affect the project at all. A medium risk is a medium priority risk, and the project team shall come up with an action plan. Heavy allocation of the resources may not be necessary for medium risk. High priority risk, project team need to ensure that they allocate enough resources to avoid or minimize the risk. Maybe we can minimize the high priority risks to a low priority risk if we allocate enough resources. Next, we move on to category of risks that we have in this project. We have risk that arise from technology, risk that arise from tools, communication, resource management in the project, design or development of the project, integration, requirements gathering of the project, and due to estimation. This is a details of the identified risk and the action plan we have implemented or look forward to implement if the risk arises. The first section or category is technology. The risks that are associated to technology can be instability of components. This is a moderate severity risk, and the likelihood of this happening is occasional. And the risk level from the 3 by 3 risk analysis method we have identified is medium risk. The indicator of this risk, that how we know the risk is happening, is we can see anomaly during the development and testing phase. Since it's instability of components, you might be able to probably identify the risk during testing phase. So our action plan to avoid or minimize the risk from happening during our important phase of the project, that might be demonstration, is to regularly test the component and so that it can be rectified at an earlier stage. So the test cases must be robust enough and must cover all areas that might be related to the component. Second one is components are not fit for use. This is a low risk, and because the likelihood of this happening is very unlikely. How to identify the risk is by the risk indicator that the components might not be responding after integration. That means before integration it was responding very well, but after integration it is not responding. That might mean that components is not fit for the use of this project. For this case too, testing is our minimization strategy or avoidance strategy for this uh, risk action plan. Next one is a component failure during any phase of the project. That can be development, testing, or demonstration. Development and testing is less of a severe, because we can still replace the component or repair. But if it happens during demo, it's at all stages it is not a risk that we can avoid. But if we go through regular testing and we know the characteristics of the component, we can minimize the occurrence of this happening. Also, a good way to deal with this risk is to have a backup component which is available for use and tested successfully. Another important technological risk that we might run into is communication errors between robot and the user. This is one of the major risks that we might face during the project, because if there is no communication, none of the movements or the mapping can be done. The risk indicator is very straightforward. The robot will not respond to any input or any instruction from the user. How to avoid or minimize this risk is for the team to have a backup connectivity option available. The team should test and get ready the backup option as well as the option they prioritized, and the team should be ready to do switching of connectivity if the risk happens. From the robot side, the robot should avoid any kind of movement if the connectivity is lost, and it should remain in place so that if this happened during a real case scenario in which stakeholders are using the robot, they can regain the connectivity, or they can go to the robot and repair if there is any technical issue with the robot. The next category of risk is risks that arise due to tools. And the first one in the category is a failure of sensors. This one is also a major risk, because without sensor are the eyes and ears of robot, and if the sensors fail, robot cannot perform its function. How to detect the risk is the value provided by the sensors will not be a normal value which it used to give during its normal working conditions. How the team should handle this risk is by testing the sensors to know what is its normal working condition, so that if there is a deviation from this working condition, the team can have a backup plan to detect the failure of sensors. And if it's a confirmed failure, then the team can request for replacement sensors. So the proper storage and safe operating condition of the components during the project is necessary to minimize the occurrence of this risk. Because if you drive the sensors beyond its operating conditions, the sensors might not be able to withstand, and it might cause a failure. The second risk that we identified in this category is motor malfunction. This one is same like the sensors, is unlikely to happen, and the risk indicator might be motor not responding to signal, or the response to signal is not normal, that how it used to respond. How to avoid or minimize this risk is to test the motors and calibrate to ensure that the normal behavior, so that we can identify if there is a deviation from the behavior. And same as in case of sensors, if it's a confirmed failure, we can request for a replacement. Proper storage and proper operating conditions are necessary to ensure the life expectancy of the motor as well as the sensors. The next one is failure of other hardware parts. Like the sensors and motors, the risk indicator is a deviation from normal behavior or previous successful behavior that we have during testing or development of the project. And the action plan is to ensure that the hardware are tested properly and also properly handled. Proper operating conditions are used. The team should be capable of minor repairs or replacement of the hardware part if necessary. The last one of the tools category is lost or misplaced hardware parts. This one is also an unlikely to happen risk, uh, but if it happens, it has a medium risk level or medium priority. How to identify this risk is very easy. During visual inspection of the hardware, there might be a missing part. How to avoid this risk is to always keep the hardware in a secure location, and a checklist can be used to check every time that all hardware components are in place. The next category of risk we are looking at today is a risk that occur due to communication or lack of communication. So the first one is lack of communication between team. How to know that risk is happening is a failure to meet deadlines or repetition of the uh, points or tasks that we have already discussed during the team meetings, or unclear division of tasks. The action plan for this risk is to have regular team meetings to ensure that all team members are updated. Then meeting minutes and timesheets also allow members to look at what happened during the previous meetings. And milestones should be clearly defined to each team members, and what should they do to meet these milestones. And the tools like project repository or other shared resources shared platforms will ensure an effective way of communication. Second one in communication category is linguistic limitations of team, that if team members are speaking different languages. The indicator to this risk is that the team members fail to understand each other. The likelihood of this is very unlikely because uh, all the team members are proficient in English language. And so our action plan for this risk is during any project discussions, meetings, team members only communicate using a common language that is known to every team member. In our case, it's English. The next category of risk is risk due to resource management. The first one is in this category is conflict of interest. This is a very occasional likelihood of happening, and severity is moderate. The risk indicator for this risk is that the team members will disapprove with the decisions of other team members or the sharing of resources. How to tackle this risk is to have the project milestones and the work division shall be fixed by the team after discussion and mutual agreement. The project manager shall resolve conflicts within the team if it arises and assign team members with their tasks according to their specific skills. Any change in this shall be voted by the team and agreed by all the team members to avoid miscommunication. The second one can be the physical or emotional unavailability of members that contribute to unavailability of human resources. This is a major risk, but the likelihood of this happening is very unlikely. Risk indicator is very clear that the team member is not contributing at a certain period of time or for the whole project. How to avoid or minimize this risk? Avoidance is not possible, but to minimize this risk, what we can do is for each task given to each team member, there is a backup team member that will help as an associate to the main team member to oversee the development of this task. This buddy system will help the two team members to understand one task, and if the other team member is unavailable, his buddy can take over. To make this happen, all documentation for the task that is cleared by the team member should be clearly backed up. This will allow a smooth handover from one team member to another. The last one in the resource management category is the loss of resources. Severity is major for this case, and the risk level is medium. The risk indicator is unavailability of previously available resource. Action plan is to have a backup for every resource, and the project management shall ensure the backup is regular and well maintained. Next category is design and development. The only risk that we have identified in this category is the risk of immature finalization of design. How to detect this risk is that the design is not performing according to the specified requirements of the stakeholder. To avoid or minimize this from happening, the development team should reflect on their work, and they need to ensure that all the requirements specification are covered. The testing team can also contribute by defining test cases that test every requirement that is specified in the SRS, and therefore any anomaly or any missing requirement can be feedback to the development team. The next category of risk is the risks that happen due to integration process. The first one is a failure of individual component during integration. The severity of this risk is moderate and likelihood is occasional. The risk indicator for this case is components show different response before and after integration. How to avoid this risk from happening is each component development team or the responsible person must communicate with the other component development team in every phase of development. This allows the integration team to ensure the communication between the components are gradually gradually tested, and this will allow a smooth integration procedure. And the integration team must be aware of the signal processing from each components and how the components interact with each other. The second one in this category is the failure of an integrated component. How to identify this is the components of the system are working perfectly when they are individual, but after integration it is not working properly. How to avoid this is to have a gradual integration process rather than an abrupt one. The individual component development team must ensure that the component is ready to integrate, and the testing team should come out with test cases that will test the effectiveness of the component after integration. The next category is requirements. The first one in the category is changes in development of design that happen during the course of the project. The severity is major because uh, the project need to go back to requirements gathering and need to change in design and develop may change in design and development. How to identify this risk is that the changes in design does not match with the required specifications. To avoid this, the team shall have regular communication strategies to adapt and reallocate resources, timeline, and tasks to accommodate the changes in design. Regular client meeting will help the team to communicate the changes with the client for confirmation if necessary. The second one in this category is misrepresentation of clients' requirements. This is one of the major severity risk, although it's unlikely to happen. The risk indicator is a design system will not fulfill or only partially fulfill the requirements specified by the client. To avoid this risk, the team should have regular meetings with the clients, and the discussions will help them to identify this risk at an early phase. Any requirement specification changes and design changes shall be regularly submitted to client for approval to avoid any miscommunication. Last but not least of all the categories of risk is risk due to estimation or failure of estimating properly. The first one is overestimation of team's ability to meet design deadlines, and the risk indicator is that deadlines are not met by the team. This is a major risk, but the likelihood of this happening is very unlikely. Action plan for this is team members have regular meetings and decide on design concepts which are feasible within the time provided. The team members should split the task between them according to their skill set and have regular client meetings as well. The next risk that is overestimation of team's expertise and knowledge. The risk indicator for this case will be a team member or team members not able to perform the task assigned to them. How to avoid this risk is to have proper communication between the team, that if one team member is unable to do the task or doesn't have the expertise, the other team member can help to clear any blocking points that the team member may face. There might be some blocking points that the team must put all their time and resource together to clear. Additional time and resource allocation should be done if necessary. So that's all for the risk management plan for SPMP for Code Runners Group. There are a few areas to improve in this risk management plan. One is accountability of the risk is not identified yet. We intend to identify it in the next version of the document. And the cause and effect of risk is also not identified in the document. Another area to improve is the effect of the action plan on the risk level. If the action plan reduce the risk, it should be clearly indicated in the risk management plan. The last one is risk monitoring is not clearly defined in the risk management plan. So these are the areas the team might look forward to implement in the next version of risk management. To conclude this presentation, we have gone through the risk management plan, risk analysis, how to identify the risk, how to analyze the risk using the table method given, and few risks that we have identified and the action plan we propose. As a conclusion, risk management is very important part of every project as well as day-to-day life. The risk management improves efficiency of project by avoiding delays or overhaul that may happen due to the risk. Risk management also prepares a team to tackle emergency situations that may arise, and it also provides a kind of transparency to stakeholders that what kind of risk that may arise in the project. So that's all for the risk management plan. Thank you for listening. Goodbye.